Thank you, Count Corley. We won't be opposing the bill, Dara, at least at this stage, because we want to see affordable housing as a matter of urgency. We undoubtedly will have amendments at the next stage, and I hope in the same way as we do actually try to be constructive, and we supported, although we thought it was incredibly limited, the residential tenancies bill. They didn't go half far enough. We didn't block it. We did seek to amend it. You didn't choose to take on board any of our amendments. We shall see what you do with any amendments or suggestions we make on this bill. But the first thing I just want to do, because there was a bit of politicking at the beginning from the Minister, so I just want to respond in kind with this stuff about pragmatism. And there's this narrative which the government wheel out, particularly, I have to say, Minister O'Brien, but I hear it from other ministers as well, that you are the pragmatists and we're the kind of idealists who, you know, talk about pie in the sky, fantasy economics, and so on. Now, you know, as somebody who studied philosophy, I just want to inform you that pragmatism is a philosophy, okay? It is an ideology. And you should maybe read about it before you go banding around the term. It's a philosophical movement that started in the United States, maybe not surprisingly, in the 1870s, with people like Charles Peirce and William James and John Dewey, and has sort of been updated with relativistic philosophers like Richard Rorty, postmodernist, post-structuralist gobbledygook that circulates in some academic circles. So let's just be clear. So-called pragmatism is an ideology, right? Every bit as much as the things you accuse us of being ideological. And as it happens, just to spell out where we're coming from, and this is directly relevant, I'm a materialist, right, as against a pragmatist. In other words, I start with the material reality, whereas pragmatism is about essentially saying we have to balance between existing and moving realities. And nowhere is this better sort of epitomized in the bill by the fact that in this affordable housing bill, we have 55 different references in the bill to things that aren't going to be done in the bill, but will be done afterwards by ministerial regulation. Now, that is the ultimate. That's pragmatism in the extreme, right? Because some of the key questions we need to answer in terms of actually delivering affordable housing are not answered in the bill. They will be answered later by the minister, depending on circumstances. So that's the actuality of pragmatism, and to be honest, it's quite undemocratic in my opinion. I don't know if it's even questionable from a legal and constitutional point of view to have that much stuff in the bill, including critically what the affordable dwelling contribution will be and the prices that are paid and how affordable limits are set and so on in particular places, all to be done later by the minister. So we don't really know what the affordable housing is actually going to be affordable. Because that's all going to be done later and is not done in the bill. The way a materialist approaches things is from a very, very simple starting point. How much, without anybody having to make profit, would it actually cost for us to build a house? If you don't have profits, you don't have marketing, you don't have speculation, you don't have all that stuff, how much would it actually cost to build a house? And it would cost 160 to 200,000 euro, depending on the size of the house. If you didn't have market conditions, which are referenced all over the LDA bill and all over this bill, in terms of how rents and affordability are going to be set, we could build houses pretty cheap ourselves. How much is the market able to deliver houses for? Well, it differs apparently in different parts of the country, which in and of itself is strange. But in my area, if you take one of the biggest developments in the country, residential developments, 400,000 for Hines to build an apartment. Now, there's a big gap, isn't there, between what it would cost us to build places and what the private sector can deliver. What are average house prices now in Dún Laoghaire? In excess of €500,000. €500,000. But your affordable housing bill and your LDA bill say that the price of affordable housing or affordable rents will be set by reference to the market, a discount from that market price. Whether it's a discount from the market rent of, I think you say 25 to 30%, or a discount on house prices, I think you said the median house price in any particular area. Now that's a big problem for us. That's not going to work. And when I say us, that's South Dublin. In fact, that's pretty much all of Dublin. And it's a lot of Galway, and it's a lot of Cork, and it's probably quite a bit of Waterford. That's a serious problem. A cap of 450,000 in my area. You'd need an income of in excess of €100,000, in fact about €120,000 a year, if it is at the top of that cap. And given that house prices in my area are $500,000, that's a serious problem. Okay, I do not see how this is going to help ordinary working people, because as I have been at pains to explain to you, Minister, is if you're on minimum wage and you happen to live in Dún Laoghaire, you don't get a higher minimum wage. If you're a public servant and happen to live in South Dublin, you don't get a higher civil servant's wage. If you're a teacher, if you're a guard, if you're a nurse, you don't get paid more because you happen to live in Dún Laoghaire. Right? But the house prices are multiples of what they are in other parts of the country, and the rents are multiples. So if this is done by reference to median market prices or rents, we have a serious problem, and I don't see how you're going to be able to deliver in our area. I just do not see how you can deliver that level of affordability, but we do know that if we did it ourselves, we could build them at 160 to 180, 200,000. So to me, that's real materialism, that's practical, you could even call it pragmatic. Why would we do it via the market that clearly is not able to deliver affordability in my area, as against do it ourselves where we clearly can? That's the simple question I ask, and I never really get an answer. So to my mind, you see, it is the pragmatism ideology that insists. It's a sort of pragmatism extremism to insist that we bring the market forces in, even though the evidence would suggest they are incapable of delivering the affordability. The shared equity scheme, the points have been made. And of course, in that context, we are going to be paying private developers these extortionate prices in the Part 5. In the Part 5 we are. Well, if you can find me some private developers who are going to be building at affordable prices in my area. I've just told you about the biggest residential development in the entire country, where I met the developers myself, and they told me the apartments are 400,000 for them to build. How much are they going to sell them back? You know, we've been asking Dún Laoghaire at Down for about 4 years, how much affordable housing are we going to get for the Leahalf funding in Cherrywood? Still can't get an answer. They can't figure it out. They can't work out the conundrum of, for the 15 million, how do we actually get a serious amount of affordable housing? I mean, originally, when the LEHAF funding was originally announced, it was going to be 30% of any development would be affordable and it would be less than 350,000. That disappeared within a few weeks because it became obvious in areas like Cherrywood that just the developers weren't going to wear that. So we have still no idea, 4 years on, and actually 10 years on since much of that was came into NAMA's hands and then it was handed over to Hines and others, how much affordable housing we're going to get or what the price of affordable housing will be. And I am none the wiser from your bill today, and I've read it through, as to how much the affordable housing will actually be in Cherrywood. Deputy Cowan makes a very, very good point as well, which I was going to make, but just to repeat it, is all the stuff, the planning permissions that have been given under the SHDs, none of the additional 10% is going to apply to them anyway. And of course we know there's a slew of SHDs, planning permissions that have been rammed through over the last few years, and which will continue to flow in until the SHD regime is wound up, and none of this additional, and I welcome the additional 10% in the Part 5 in terms of affordable housing, but none of that vast swathe, in other words, a huge amount of the stuff that is actually going to be built, if they build it, and if they aren't just speculating on the land, which clearly a lot of them are, but in terms of the stuff that they build over the next number of years, a lot of the stuff that will be built, actually that 10% affordable housing won't apply to anyway. So we would need far more radical measures, which I think we should be taking, to insist in areas like Cherrywood and others that we get the additional affordable housing immediately, and we take much more radical measures to achieve that. The cost rental aspect of this, I also just want to question. Now, first of all, the cost rental rents are again being checked against market rents. I don't understand why that would be the case. Because again, the sort of people who are on income grounds, and your eligibility for cost rental will be based on income. Because if your income is too high for social housing, then the next category up will be cost rental, right? So your eligibility for social or cost rental will continue to be income based, but the rent you pay in cost rental will differ in different places. That's wrong, okay? That's wrong. It's not fair. Why should it be different? Why should you pay higher cost rental in Shankill than in Salt Hill? Why? Give me a good reason. There is no good reason.
Cost of building and managing. We'll go through it at committee, Richard.
Oh, yeah, it's the costs.
There's a lot of your questions.
Yeah, it's the costs, right?
Of course.
But it means you will be paying higher rent even though your income is the same as other people. That's not fair. And the fact that you haven't raised the income threshold, or previous governments, I mean, I was laughing when you did your topical issue the other day with Donnacha O'Leary, and he was talking, and you announced the income threshold review for social housing. Do you know how long that review's been going on? Going on about 4 years. I remember every year every few months I'd ask Owen Murphy about it. When is the income threshold review? Oh, it's coming soon. It's underway. Never came. Never came. Why? Because there's a policy. There's a policy in the Department of Housing to constantly reduce the number of people who are eligible for social housing. And in effect, to replace much of previous social housing provision, if you like, and eligibility with cost rental, because the rents will be higher in cost rental than they will be in social housing. In that regard, of course, here's another ideological phrase from the pragmatists that appears yet again in this bill, and I asked you to take it out of the LDA bill, and it appears undue segregation. Undue segregation. As far as I know, in the report stage of the LDA bill, that hasn't been replaced. You can correct me if I'm wrong. You said you would look at it.
LDA bill, yeah.
Okay, well, let's hope it's gone, but it appears, okay, but it appears again here.
That's just for clarification. We haven't published the
Okay,
amendment
fair,
report stage of the LDA bill.
Fair enough.
So
My office were telling me that there was no change.
Maybe they have a mole in the bill.
They might have.
They might have.
We need a mole in your department.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Absolutely need a mole in your department. But the phrase appears here again, undue segregation, as if there is a due or acceptable level of segregation. There isn't. And why does it appear? And I'll tell you why it appears. It is because de facto, the pragmatic solution is actually about new forms of segregation, new forms of classification of cohorts of people who will be suitable for different types of housing based on another phrase I really dislike and I find insulting, frankly, social background. So undue segregation of people of different social backgrounds. That is a prejudiced, sort of preconceived, predetermined notion of certain people living in certain types of housing, certain types of tenures, and they will actually be segregated, it would appear, unless we really get rid of segregation. And I know that in the previous incarnation of the Part 5, when it was social and affordable housing, there was segregation, and is segregation in much of the Part 5 developments, where literally the Part 5 10% social housing is a separate block away from the privately owned housing. And it's very segregated, and it's a sort of form of social and housing apartheid. And indeed, different finishings and so on in different houses. The other aspect of cost rental I worry about is the fact that it's another investment opportunity where the investor who asks for the building they own, the residence they own or have built, to be designated as cost rental will essentially get the cost of the house paid for by the tenant over a period of 25 years and then can opt out of the cost rental scheme and then sell it on. So we're creating investment opportunities, but at the end of the period, they can pull out of the arrangement. Another question I have about cost rental is what happens when your income exceeds the cost rental eligibility limits while you're in the house, while you're living there? Certainly I know in England they brought in this so-called flexible social housing scheme where your eligibility for social housing that you were living in was reviewed every 5 years. And therefore creates the conditions where they can actually throw you out of social housing if your income exceeds a certain level. Is that going to happen with cost rental housing? Okay, well, I'll be glad to get the reassurance, but certainly in the earlier incarnations of this, that's what we were being told a few years ago about cost rental. But in any event, I don't see why we are creating an investment opportunity for cost rental for private investors to essentially get an investment paid for them through the rents that will be paid by the tenant, and then they can then pull out of the arrangement after 25 years with an investment paid for by somebody else and then sell it on into the market or do whatever they want to do with it. So that is why I believe, Minister, that things will be far, far simpler if in terms of whether you call it cost rental, whether you call it public, whether you call it social, it should be based on income. That's how you get rid of segregation and these different notions of different backgrounds, is that you pay your rent according to your ability to pay, and that anybody at all can apply for social housing. So it's not this notion that it's only people on the very lowest of incomes that are social housing type people. It should be anybody is in social housing, and they will pay a different rent according to their ability to pay. And equally, with affordable housing, it should be the same. affordability should be based on your income, not by any reference to the market, particularly when the areas where the housing and affordability crisis are worst are precisely in the places where the market is out of control and is incapable of delivering housing that is actually affordable to ordinary working people. So we're not going to oppose it. We will seek to amend it, but I think there are not just concerns. I think many of aspects of this, and particularly the LDA aspect of it, are actually potentially going to make the situation worse, cost the state a lot of money. So we are opposing the LDA bill. We won't oppose this, but we want a proper notion of affordability that is based on income, not on the market.